Hello, everybody. So very excited to be here with you at Vue.js Nation. I am Daniel Kelly. The title of my talk is Vue-doo Magic, AI Development Tricks. Now, the reason I decided on this title, okay, let's be honest, AI decided on this title. And to be honest, it's really quite fitting one, right? Because AI is still relatively new to the development world, and we're still getting our feet wet. We're still, trying to kind of figure things out. And a lot of it still feels like magic. I'm going to be honest, AI still makes me feel a little like an awkward teenager. I don't exactly know where I fit into this new AI world. It gives me a little bit of anxiety knowing, not knowing what the future of development looks like. And I don't think I'm the only one, right? I think there's probably plenty of you out there who feel somewhat the same way, but we will figure it out together. And more importantly, we must figure it out together. The one thing you absolutely cannot do is ignore AI and continue to do things the way you've always done them. You're going to fall behind. It's just a new world that we're living in, and you've got to learn how to adopt AI into your workflows. That's what this talk is all about. But why do we need to start adopting AI? Well, let's just get a quick little introduction into how AI can boost your development workflows. Number one, know that AI is a co-pilot and not a developer. You're still required in the picture. This isn't me just regurgitating things I found online. This is my experience. AI cannot do it by itself, but it will it will boost your productivity. Excuse me for one moment. Let me get a drink of water. By the way, I'm coming down with the flu, and my son has the flu in just the next room over. So if you do hear any coughing at any point, I do apologize. But AI will produce your productivity when it's used responsibly. However, it can also destroy your productivity. And I'm also saying this from experience as well. If you turn your brain off and think that, oh, okay, AI can do it all for me, then you actually end up digging yourself a bigger hole than is worth it. So, last thing here is do not believe everything you hear on social media. I don't know how many times I've seen people post, they've never written a line of code in their life, and yet they're all of a sudden making thousands of dollars with an app they wrote with AI. I just don't believe it, to be honest. In most cases, I just don't believe it. Because AI is good, but it's not that good yet. It still needs us developers to take the reins, to drive the cart, and to really point it the right direction. Yes, it's super helpful, but it can't do it all by itself. So, why AI? Of course, to produce code more quickly, but also I found since you're in the weeds of the code less, you're in some of the actual details of the code less, you're fighting with the little things less, it actually helps to surface solutions that you never even thought about. And it helps you think in a higher business level kind of need, right? So yeah, we were thinking about our users before, but we also had to think a lot about the technical implementation details. Because we can think less now about some of those technical implementation details. I didn't say not about them, but less about them. We're able to focus a little bit more on the real end goal, right? Which is user experience and business needs. Okay, so in order to develop this talk, I thought it would be good to have a little case study app to really make some of the concepts concrete. So I built this textbook exam generator. Essentially, you scan in pages from a hard copy textbook, and that uses AI to produce an interactive exam based on the content of that textbook. That's exactly what you see here. So we're going to learn two things from this little case study. Number one, we're going to learn how did I use AI to help me develop this case study, but how did I also integrate AI into the app to make it more user-friendly. So we're talking about AI for DX as well as AI for UX, right? Okay, so let's tackle that first concept first, using AI to write code. Excuse me. First things first, you do need to download Cursor. I drug my feet on this for a little while, but you really have to do it. For those who are coming from Visual Studio Code, it's a really easy transition since it's a form. Okay? Why download Cursor? Well, it has inline AI autocompletion, just like GitHub Copilot. That's not super special. It also has AI chat. That's not super special. GitHub Copilot also has that. But the real win is the composer. Okay? So the composer does more than just generate some code in the next few lines of your file. It does more than just talk to you about your code in your open file. It actually can generate code in multiple files. You can give it a prompt and it can write code. It can search through your code base and write code in multiple different places. It could even run commands in your terminal. It'll give you the little command and show you, and you can just click it and it'll run. All of these changes that it makes automatically are easily managed or reverted with Git. So it's fully compatible with your version control system. It even writes files to the system before you accept those changes. You'll see what I mean by that in just a moment. But essentially, it means you could see the output of the code in your browser that the LLM generates, and you can say, okay, does this meet my needs or not? And then you can commit those things. Therefore, the composer is great for all kinds of use cases. It's great for generating components, for generating tests, or even full features. Let's give it a quick try with a full feature. Now, I don't suggest this method most often, to be honest. It's expecting a little too much of it. But let's just see what happens, because I want you to see what all it's able to do inside of this composer window. So back over in my browser, do notice that I have a settings page, but when I click on it, nothing happens. There is no settings page for users yet. Let's try asking the composer to make one. So make a settings page for the user to configure common user settings, as well as exam creation preferences. Okay, so this is a pretty vague prompt, and I wouldn't do this in a real-world scenario. I would be more specific, but let's just see what it outputs. It says, I'll help you create a settings page. First, let's check the existing code base. So this is awesome. This is what I want you to see. It actually searches through your code base to find relevant files. You don't necessarily have to manually add context. You can come down here and type @ and then add context of what files it should be aware of, what documentation it should be aware of. You can even link different URLs, so different docs on the web. So you can manually provide context, but it's also decently smart enough to search through and find some context. Next, it it goes and searches to see, okay, where should I create the necessary components and page. It found my schema file. So it says, okay, I do need to make an update to the database. This is the really cool part. This is also what I want you to see. So it actually runs my linter on the file to check, are there any lint errors after the changes have made, and there are not. Then it goes and creates the settings page as a component. By the way, I am using Nuxt in this application. So we're creating API endpoints inside of API/users/settings. That looks great. It's defining an event handler here, which is how it should do it in Nuxt. Awesome. It comes across an error. It cannot find the name server Supabase user. So I'm using Supabase for the authentication system in this application. It picked up on that based on the rest of the code base and some of my cursor rules. But it ran and said, okay, there's a error here. Let me try to fix it. And it did. Look at there. It imported the proper thing. Now it creates another endpoint for updating. And then finally, it updates the navigation. So this navigation item right here, it looks like it found it. And it knows that's what we want to link to the page. Okay, very cool. Back over my browser now, I'm just going to give the page a refresh. And then let's try going to settings. Sweet, that worked. Here we have a theme preference, which is a common user setting, right? And here's some exam preferences. The default question type, Notification preferences, that's a common preference as well. If I hit save changes, it looks like nothing happens. If I open up and check out the console, yeah, we do have an internal server error. So it's definitely not perfect, but it bootstrapped a lot of these files that were necessary for me to create manually, and I don't have to do that anymore. I can just tweak them now according to my needs. So that's pretty cool. Like I said, this is probably a little too much to ask it to do all at one time. It's actually quite amazing how far it actually got. Okay. So let's talk about a little bit more realistic scenario where we generate a single component from the composer. In this case, I'm generating this file upload dialog. I totally did this completely with the composer when I was creating this application. You'll notice it had error handling built in. It said, "Oh, I can't upload that image type." I didn't have to do that. Even gave a way to remove each of the different images before upload, and it showed previews of all the images. I literally didn't have to do any manual coding with that. It took me maybe 15-20 minutes to get this working. So a huge time saver. This is the prompt I used, or at least something similar to this, in order to generate this component. Like I said, it did take some back and forth, but essentially I told it I needed an image upload component. It should appear in the modal overlay. It should accept multiple files and use Supabase storage to store the files and display preview. Okay, I told it fairly specifically the things that I wanted. Now, the response here is actually that we already have such a component, because I just, for the sake of this slide, tried to get it to do it again after I'd already created it. But yeah, look at there. Look how cool. It searched my code base and says, I already have a file for this. Let's just use it. Okay, so some general tips for generating components with the composer. Of course, be specific about what you want. Use .cursor rules to specify preferences, and steer the LLM away from common mistakes. Don't expect a perfect working solution out of the box. Okay? For those of you who don't know what .cursor rules is, it's basically just this kind of hint to send along to the LLM with every prompt. It tells it a little bit more about your preferences and the structure of your application. Okay? Let me close this right here, and I'll show you my full .cursor rules. Once again, this is a Nuxt project, but I have about 177 lines of cursor rules in here. These are the rules that specifically have to deal with components. Notice I tell it that shadcn view is installed. Okay, so I tell it how to create these new and install these new shadcn components. I give it some logic around how do I want my components to be separated. Dumb components, those that only are worried about presentation, should be named in one way and should be broken up from components that deal with, talking to the database, talking to the backend, things like that. So I also tell it about just my general preferences. I want to use TypeScript to define all components. I want to use JS docs to document the component props and emits. I have a particular order that I like my component sections to exist in. And then a good example of kind of fixing common errors is this bit right here. I found that over and over again, it would use $fetch inside of the root level of script setup, which duplicates requests on both client and server. So I just told it, hey, don't do that anymore, right? After it happened 3 or 4 times, I said, don't do that anymore. Instead, use fetch in the root of script setup, and only use $fetch to react to different user events, so on and so forth. And I gave it an example. This is huge. This is a good takeaway right here. In your cursor rules, provide examples. Examples go so much further than you just trying to explain yourself in plain English or whatever language you use. Okay? All right, so those are my cursor rules for components. Now, you can also use AI to generate a unit test. I didn't do that for this project, but in general, I've found that generating a unit test will use vtest in the context of a Vue project. It does generate relevant test cases specifically. Of course, you do have to tweak it a little bit, but just like with components, they are a great starting point. Okay, here are some general workflow tips when generating code with the composer. Number one, generate a log of features. In your cursor rules file, just tell it, hey, when you create a new feature or create a new component or create a new test inside of the composer, you write to a file, the central file somewhere that logs those changes so that it has more context moving forward. Absolutely don't generate everything from scratch. Use existing libraries, etc. I definitely ran into this rabbit hole where I tried to generate an entire user management system from scratch. It was just much easier just to install something that already works and tell tell the LLM that I have it installed, right? Provide screenshots. So if you're looking to update, particular pieces of the UI, take a screenshot of the UI. Use your little, editing tools on your computer to circle what you want changed. And I found that really helps narrow down in the LLM. It really helps narrow down what you're talking about, right? Commit early, commit often. It's a great rule for just developer life in general, but really applies to working with AI generated code because it can screw things up really, really quickly. It can help you, but it can also screw things up really, really quickly. So make sure you can get back to a good working point. Of course, don't trust the bot. Always review generated code. Don't try to do everything at one time and describe in detail what you use the .cursor rules file to define your coding preferences and common patterns within your application, like we saw just a moment ago. Slow down. Slow down. I found it very tempting when generating code with AI to move quick, 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 because the AI is quick, quick, quick. But if I didn't stop and actually read what it output, I found myself getting into trouble fairly quickly. So slow down. Don't trust everything it says. Read things. Pretend it's a conversation with a junior developer. Tweak things along the way. Overall, just slow your mindset down. Okay? I promise you, even though you are slowed down in one sense, your productivity is actually sped up, which is great for everybody. You get a less rushed, a less hectic, less frustrated, work lifestyle, and you produce more than you ever have before. Copy and paste examples of your API payloads, JSON data, etc., to pass to the LLM. So when you're talking about data in the chat, give it an example of it. Okay, so that's developing with AI. Now let's talk about integrating AI into your app. I know we've got to move kind of fast now. There are lots of different use cases. Just a few might be extracting text from image, like in our little example application, generating image alts. AI is really good about seeing what's in an image and then describing it, translating text into different languages, empowering smarter searches that allow for more semantic searches with RAG, summarizing content, generating images and video. The use cases go on and on. Here are my tips for using AI in your apps. Number one is use the right model for the right task. You've probably heard this before, but here's a concrete example of this. When I first started working on this little exam project here, I was using the Claude 3 Opus model, the smartest one, in order to scan those pages and generate text from those pages. Well, that took about 35 seconds on average and cost me about 9 cents per page, which is terrible, right? However, just by switching the model, one little line of my code to Claude 3.5 Sonnet, I was able to save more than half of the time, and I was able to get the cost down to a penny per page, which is still pretty expensive, yes, but it's a whole lot better than 9 cents. The idea here is that there are lots of different models available. Play with different ones and see which one still gives you a great result, but for a cheaper price and at a faster speed. Just like when you're actually chatting to Cursor, when you're implementing prompts inside of your code, provide examples in your prompts. So let me show you what this looks like. Over inside of, I've got a file here called anthropic.service, and here is a function called extract text from the page. All right, notice here I am using Claude 3.5 Sonnet, but this is what I'm passing to the LLM. Please extract and return all of the text content from this textbook page. Format it naturally, preserving paragraphs, headings, and any important structural elements. Output the text in a markdown format to preserve structures like lists, tables, headings, etc. So I'm being very specific about what I want, and then I'm providing it an example of the string that I want it to return. And I tell it, do not return anything else. Only return to me a JSON object with a page number. So it grabs the page number from the scan page and then the actual text in markdown format. Notice I've got a nice little example in here about what I want, a little description about what I want this data to be. The page number of the textbook, page if found as a string, otherwise null. Okay, so provide those examples in your prompts. And it's really that easy, right? You're just talking and playing English. You're not, they say that prompt engineering is this big thing, right? It's really just about being specific about what you want. Just be very specific about what you want, okay? And examples are a great way to be specific. And then ask for JSON-only responses. I talked to somebody very recently about this. They said, how in the world can you actually develop an app with AI, right? It's just text. Well, actually, JSON is just text too, right? So you can turn these text-based responses into these snazzy user interfaces by asking for JSON. That's exactly how I'm getting, so on this exam right here, that's exactly how I'm getting these questions, right? This JSON comes back from the LLM, and I just write components, or I have Cursor write components for me that understand that JSON format and then are able to display UI based on that. Okay. By the way, XML works really great too in your prompts. So over inside of this file called create test prompt, I'm using XML to this is a long prompt. So I'm using XML to kind of break up the different sections in it. Here's some general instructions. Here's my example exam. So this is the prompt to create the actual exam. So to turn the textbook page text into this JSON that actually powers an exam. And I'm using XML to break everything up. It really likes that because it's very well structured. Okay. Another thing you're going to have to do when working in apps with AI is you need to mitigate latency. It's just slow. It's the way it is, right? So you can do this by either streaming responses or using some kind of job queue. If you need a JSON object back, you really can't stream. But if you just need straight text back, more like a chatbot, then go ahead and stream it. Job queues, though, are super simple to set up in the context of a Nuxt application. This is exactly what I'm doing inside of the exam app, okay? There's just a database table somewhere with the scans in there. They have a status of not processed or something like that. And this job just goes and grabs everything from the table that's not processed. And then in the background, where the user doesn't have to wait for a response, in the background, it goes and sends these pages off to the LLM to be processed. Okay? Another thing that is extremely useful is chunking larger requests to the LLMs into smaller pieces, but then pass along a summary of the content. For example, when I was generating larger exams, like 30 questions long, the LLM would come back with just 10 questions, even though I expressly told it to generate 30 questions. It was simply using up all of its tokens. So what I did is when it came back with 10 questions, I counted how many questions it came back with in my code because I could JSON parse its response, right? I could just do an array length. I counted those and I said, okay, how many are left to get to my desired result? I sent the prompt back to the LLM a second time, but this time asking only for 20 questions, and then also providing the just the questions that it gave me before, not all the options for the questions, not everything I gave it before, but just enough context to know, hey, you already created these questions for me, don't duplicate those, right? So chunk your prompts into smaller pieces to get back larger responses, right? But make sure you pass along context from previous prompts as necessary. Okay, finally, maybe the most exciting part of this talk, because hey, it's fun to talk about tooling. Let's talk about some useful tools that I've found just on the internet. So database.build is a really great way to enter a prompt for an app you're trying to build. This example uses a social media scheduling tool like Buffer, and it generates some schema, some database schema for what an app like that might need. And then you can just export this as SQL. Really interesting for brainstorming and figuring things out. In terms of SQL land, Supabase SQL, um, the Supabase dashboard inside of their SQL, little client, they actually have AI built right in. It can help you write queries, debug query issues, set up RLS policies, and a whole lot more. So I use this a decent amount actually in another project I'm doing outside of Vue School. Bolt.new is a really handy editor for bootstrapping micro apps very quickly. In my opinion, it's really only good for micro apps at this point, though a lot of people are using it for more than just micro apps, but it really does a lot of the same things Cursor does, but in a more junior developer friendly kind of way. People who have never worked with code before, right? They can just visit it directly in their browser and start doing things. This little example that you're seeing on the screen now is a gamer themed blog that I created with literally like 4 prompts and in 10, 20 minutes, something like that. Very, very quick, and it actually looks really, really nice, and it works. The commenting system was the most complicated part about it, and it handled it with just a few prompts. The whole rest of the site was actually done in a single prompt. So there's that available. There's, of course, also Claude, which is a general ChatGPT alternative. This is my go-to nowadays. I don't use ChatGPT anymore. I found that Claude typically writes better code, can even run some of that code. For example, the other day, I had a spreadsheet that I wanted to get some nice visualizations for. I just dropped the spreadsheet into Claude, told it to what I wanted to visualize as a bar chart, and it did it. It generated some React code and actually ran the React code and showed me a nice little bar chart right there in the interface. Finally, there is Photoshop. Yes, I'm a little bit old school, but check this out. If you are a web designer, maybe more so than a developer, or if you dabble in a little bit of both, the AI tooling in Photoshop really it's not worth sneezing at. It's very, very powerful. You can remove objects, just like you saw there on the screen. You can generate brand new objects inside a certain, area of the picture with just a few clicks. And it's super, super fast. I actually use this quite a bit. So Photoshop, it's still around. It's still very, very powerful. I am Daniel Kelly. I am the lead instructor at Vue School. You can find me at DanielKelly_IO on Twitter. I am still hanging out there for now. But if you want my slides for this talk, as well as my .cursor rules that I used for the exam project, then I will tweet those out after this talk. Give me a follow so you don't miss it. Finally, are you interested in learning more about AI with an AI for Developers masterclass? We're considering building just such a course with the content team here at Vue School. So if you are interested in this and you want to become a AI master when it comes to developing apps, then scan the QR code that you see on the screen. We'll all learn a little something together as we try to navigate this new AI world that we find ourselves living in. It's just a quick survey. It's just going to ask for your email, and you can, if we end up actually making the course, we'll give you details about that in your email inbox. All right, that is all from me, everyone. Thank you so very much for your time and attention. Now go code some awesome things with Vue and maybe some AI as well. See you later.
Hey Jen, sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you. Um, I'm not sure why. I think it's on my side though.
No, it's on my side. My mic keeps disconnecting today. I'm not sure why. Just like all of a sudden. Can you hear me now?
Oh no.
Uh-oh. Audience, can you hear
I'm
me?
looking on my side.
Okay. Daniel is working on figuring it out.
Hey, can you hear me, Jen?
I can. Can you hear me?
Okay. It looks like you
No.
can hear me, but I still can't hear you. I think I've got something going on with my audio. Um, I'm happy to answer questions. I can see them on the screen. Yeah.
Um, okay. Well, we'll try
Let
it
me
and see
try
if you
hopping
can
out
read the
and
question.
hopping right back in.
Can you hear me
Hey,
now?
Jen. Oh no, I still can't hear you. I'm so sorry.
Okay. We will just do banners. I'll read them.
This will be fun.
Okay. How do you efficiently
All
prompt
right,
AI tools for Vue specific tasks?
let me try answering this question here. So, how do you effectively prompt AI tools for Vue specific tasks? Um, the Having some rules in that cursor rules file is probably a big start. Kind of give it some preferences there. Um, and sorry, I'm still just trying to figure out if there's a different way I could hear you. You know what? I bet I could hear you outside of our streaming platform. I bet I could hear you on the actual live stream, but that's probably going to be delayed, though, isn't it? Um, Let me see if I can. Okay. Yeah, that's super fine behind. Sorry about that, y'all. Um, but yeah, the duck cursor rules is probably your best bet there.
All right.
What strategies do you use to review and validate AI generated code? Um, Really, it's just a matter of you know uh, reviewing what it wrote. I mean, the quickest thing you can do is um, the quickest thing you can do is run the code, right, and see if it takes the output that you're looking for. And but then a lot of times you do want to actually read the code afterwards, because it may be outputting what you want, but it may be going a long roundabout way of doing that. So yeah, always read what it generates. And do you have good cursor rules for Vue, especially when telling the AI to use the new features from Vue? Um, yeah, I've the cursor rules that I use for this project I can share. Mostly, I've just found um, mostly I've found that you just have to tell it, hey, you want to use the composition API and script setup, and after that, it gets most things right. Like those are the biggest things that it usually starts to try the options API first, but otherwise it's once you tell it you prefer script setup and the composition API, it's usually pretty good, but about most everything else from then on. Is the source code for that project open to the public? I haven't I haven't put it up on GitHub. It's just on my local machine. I might do that. I'm gonna make sure I d I didn't do anything like I never intended to release it publicly, so there might be like a key in there or something that shouldn't be available to just anyone. But if there is, I'll remove it and I'll consider releasing that. I'll share on my Twitter afterwards. If I do end up releasing that, I'll share it on my Twitter. But I definitely will release the cursor rules. I'll show those cursor rules on Twitter for everybody. Thanks so very much, Jed.